Hi, and welcome back to Continual. Tonight we are diving into the worlds of Wakanda and the Black Panther. I'm your host, Jim Nettles, and let's see who all has come in to join the conversation. So, Kyoko?
Hi, everyone. I am Kyoko M. I am the author of the Black Parade Urban Fantasy series and the Of Cinder and Bone science fiction series. I'm also a contributor to Black Panther Tales of Wakanda, which is a Marvel Comics Titan Books anthology. And I am in the upcoming anthology Captain America, The Shield of Sam Wilson, which is also by Marvel Comics and Titan Books as well.
Doc?
Hi, I am Doc Coleman. I write steampunk comedy adventure. I don't write for Marvel, but I have enjoyed their work for many years, and I definitely enjoyed the Black Panther movies in the MCU.
Robyn?
Hi, my name is Robyn. I am a podcaster, and my podcast is called Diversity Issues, and we talk about diversity in indie comics.
So let's actually start with where everybody got your first introduction to Black Panther. Now, for me, it was comics probably in the 90s. And I had a friend who was avid reader, avid fan of the series. And I don't remember which arc it was I got pulled into and started into. But Kyoko, where did you get your start with the Black Panther series?
So for me personally, it really was the film. Now, I had always been aware of T'Challa and Black Panther in general. But unfortunately for me, like a lot of my adult life did not allow me to collect comics past when I was about 18 or so. So, bills and work and things. So I didn't really get a chance to continue beefing up my little comic book collection here. So that wasn't my first exposure, but it was probably the one where I got the most summary of what the character is about. My dad is a huge comic book fan, so a lot of the stuff I grew up on reading was provided by him and then by my cousins. And so I was always kind of aware of T'Challa, but I didn't know a lot about him just because, I don't think we had any particular Black Panther comics at the house. So the movie for me was the first real exposure.
Yeah, for me, the fun of it came because I had a friend of mine who I worked with that was a huge comic book nerd. And we occasionally would go over to the store, and he was more DC, but is the one that got me hooked into it. Mm-hmm. But Doc, how about you?
For folks who have seen me on these panels before, I'll repeat the story that I was mostly into DC comics in my youth, but I went off to college and had a suite mate in the dorms who was very into Marvel comics and invited me to read his comics. And that kind of got me back into it. And I remember seeing, I think he actually had some of the early run Black Panther, but mostly what I saw was Black Panther's appearances in the Avengers. And I loved him as a character in the Avengers, just because he always seemed to be one of the most level-headed people on the team. And he may not always have had just the right approach to it, but he was definitely one of those characters that just did not give up on something. But I was very excited when I heard about the first movie come out. And of course, went out and saw it and could not wait for a sequel. Unfortunately, we had an almost perfect, if not perfect, Black Panther in Chadwick Boseman, and very sorry to have lost him. But I think they did an excellent job following up with Wakanda, and I really hope they do more.
Robyn, how about you?
So it's kind of this nebulous thing where I don't recall exactly when it happened. I remember reading, having one of those epic editions of Black Panther where they collected his first appearance and things like that. And so it's really the campy 60s comics, and I was like, good grief. And then I did a little Googling and found that the modern kind of take is more so with the Christopher Priest run. So I read that. And I feel like I remember learning about him from kind of like a cultural impact standpoint. There was this documentary that I saw maybe like 10, 12 years ago, something like that, called White Scripts, Black Supermen. So it's about the history of Black superheroes, especially kind of like in the early days and following kind of like the cultural impact of having Black characters be introduced into mainstream comics, and kind of some of the stumbling blocks and the hiccups of them being predominantly written by white writers.
Yeah, and one of the things was that with the latest Black Panther movie, was talking to Jonathan Mayberry, who was one of the credited scriptwriters, because it was part of one of his arcs that was used to create the most current movie. But so looking at kind of the history and the legacy of Black Panther and of Wakanda, one of the things that drew me in was the tech, right? It was all of gorgeous cities, gorgeous colors, gorgeous culture. And it was seeing all of the tech from kind of that hidden civilization. And that was one of the things that pulled me in fairly early, being kind of the tech head that I am. So Doc, you started talking a little bit about the character. What is it about the history of Black Panther, the history of Wakanda, that really kind of holds you into the universe?
I mean, I love the whole idea that you've got a small African country who's got technology that is beyond everybody else in the world. Just because the rest of the world needs a punch in the hubris, and that's it. They're just, I don't know. I also like the way they represented the movies. I don't remember this so much in the comics, but in the movies, I love the fact that you had a combination of low tech and high tech, and that's for me, that's a commentary on a lot of these things where people are saying, "Oh, technology is ruining us," and it's like, technology just doesn't have to ruin us unless we let it, or unless we make it ruin us. But I love the fact that people sat down and thought about not just what could you do with technology, but if your culture is important to you, how do you carry your culture into your technology? And even if it's a culture that I don't fully understand, I can still see that in some of the stuff that's represented.
Robyn?
Muted.
Yep, you're on mute.
I do that all the time. Sorry. So I have an answer in my mind, but I forgot your exact question. So can you repeat it just so I make sure I don't stray too far off of what you actually asked?
Well, it's really what is it about what is it about the series? What is it about the character? What is it about the world? Because one of the things that, to me, with the stories of Black Panther, was it was very much presenting, and granted, in the comics, you didn't see much of it, or at least out of the ones I ran. But when you did see it, you knew that there was a much greater technological civilization. You saw there was complexity. There was this hidden world with Wakanda that, to me, was really important. It was that idea of the hidden world, and which also has a lot of messaging to it, right? The idea that you've got to take ultimately when we get into the movies, I think they really build it up. This idea of it's a technological power that could take over the planet if so motivated. At least in a lot of the comics I read, it wasn't quite that powerful, but you see this idea of a load of vibranium as an element. But what is it about just that particular Tales of the World that kind of holds you into it?
Okay, gotcha. Thank you for going over that. So when I read the comics, so for me, people are drawn to stories because there's always something that they connect to, right? And so when I read the comics, the ones that I particularly read, a lot of the times he was on missions for the Avengers. So he was like in New York, he was separated from Wakanda. So it was kind of really like just another superhero story. And as I mentioned before, I read a lot of indie comics. So I'm really kind of interested more in having that connection to the story and to the characters. So the movies themselves really drew me in a way that the comics kind of hadn't up to that point, because for a few reasons. One, because of just the expansive effort that they put into, and the care that they put into creating a technologically futuristic but very specifically African culture, in the way they infuse those and combine those, and kind of like Doc was saying, where you had the combinations of traditions and also visions of the future, and combining those two together with the African aesthetic was one thing that really drew me in. But the thing that really kept me there and kept me grounded in the story was that they made that connection to the African American story. Because even though I have African ancestry, I'm still culturally American. And so the fact that they brought those two worlds together in a story that was very centered in an African American experience, but also a very hopeful and beautiful and joyous African experience, it just hit so many points for me. It was a win-win for me all around.
And Alex, glad you were able to join us.
Hi, sorry, late, but there's a lot of confusion in terms of the connecting.
It's been that kind of a technology evening.
Okay. Hi, everybody.
You want to give a quick introduction?
It's me.
That's quick.
And that's what the website is too. Here and Now.
Yeah, right. Simmons Here and Now. Yes. Alex Simmons, freelance writer, publisher, writing consultant, and coach, as well as a teacher in screenwriting and a few other things. And I've written a number of different comic book characters, including Archie, Batman, Superman, Black Panther, and then some independent projects, and of course, one of them being my own creation, Blackjack, The Adventures of Aaron Day, an African-American soldier fortune in the 1930s. So that's the quick intro there.
So we're just kind of getting started into the world of Black Panther, the idea of the culture, the technology, and the hidden nature of Wakanda and that culture and the importance of it, and kind of, what is it about that grabs you? So what is it for just that world that's important to you?
It's funny because I remember the first time someone asked me that, and the reference I made at the time seemed to throw people for a moment. But again, remembering I've been around for a while, one of the first things that appealed to me was the cross-cultural splendor of Camelot in Africa. Because that was what was the first thing that came out. When I was a kid growing up, we were always shown in films and television shows the Arthurian Camelot background of kings and knights and royalty and all of that. And every show or every film that had anything to do with Africa, we were usually living in huts and running from the very animals that we lived side by side with, unless Tarzan or someone like that was intervening. And for me to see Wakanda originally in this comic book form was spectacular. But then to see how beautifully they brought that two-dimensional world into a three-dimensional world, very vibrant and very alive and very exciting and very promising, that was a big kick for me. Because again, now I could see that form of royalty and that power and that heroic figure within the African culture. Finally, I felt like we were being seen on a level of, say, Timbuktu, but with a futuristic slant to it.
Kyoko?
For me, it was one of the few the times where I saw a major studio with a major project actually portray the culture in a way that wasn't the other. A lot of the problems with American filmmaking is that every time we go to a country that either people are not familiar with or they're familiar with seeing it portrayed in a certain way, there's always this feeling of other. They always try to, they're not doing it intentionally, I don't think so, but there's always this sort of angle at which they approach it where it kind of is like, ooh, look at how weird and exotic this is. And it's not, I don't really feel that that's doing anybody any favors by having that kind of lens of like, oh, that's so weird. Look at what they do versus what we do in American culture. But Black Panther to me had no shred of that. It was just the first movie just opens up and it's character based and you see this vibrant, beautiful, interesting world and you meet all these characters and you understand the storyline and how it's on its own, and then it ties back into the larger storyline, but it didn't feel like it had, because again, especially since people who don't watch a lot about Africa tend to think that, oh no, Africa is just like a continent full of third world countries. And it's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. But because if you've only been watching American cinema, yeah, you would think that Blood Diamond is what every single country in Africa is like. And that's ridiculous. That's not what it's like. So it was just nice to see that type of attitude being adopted for this particular storyline and for these characters, is that nothing was portrayed as being weird, unusual, unacceptable. I mean, just so many things about it were all positive portrayals, but at the same time, it didn't get on a soapbox and be like, oh my God, this is perfect and no problems. It dug into exactly what was wrong with the central conflict between T'Challa and N'Jaka. And just in his father, like I said, I remember being so touched in that scene when he's on the astral plane and he calls his dad out and said, you were wrong. That was so powerful to just see dealing with generational trauma and just like all these, but again, not being afraid to say, no, it looks like this place is utopia, but it's actually not. There are things that are still wrong in Wakanda, just like there are in the rest of the world. So I love that it definitely had a utopian vibe, but that was not what it was. And they made sure to be like, no, they're human, just like everybody else. They make mistakes, same as everybody else. And they have conflicts among themselves too. So those were, I think, really what drew me into the story.
And I second that. I love the fact that they made the characters very nuanced.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit. And I want to put T'Challa to the side because we're going to spend a fair amount of time. But you've got a well-rounded world of characters. You've got this beautiful world of culture. You've got this, you can see it. But and much like you're saying, you can see there's a lot of things that work well, and there's a lot of flaws in the system, like any system in any culture. So, Robyn, who is it, other than T'Challa? What are kind of your favorite characters? What are some of the favorite pieces that you've seen out of the world so far?
So, I am kind of a goofball, and also I have a very strong connection with my siblings, in particular my sisters. So that dynamic between Shuri and T'Challa, where she's just like super goofy but still very brilliant, and how they can tease each other and they just have this back and forth that just flows naturally to them. I just really connected to their relationship. And just seeing, the joy and the strength and just them being able to have just a kind of, to Kyoko's point, like just a normal relationship that was just very joyous. I really loved that, those two characters together, specifically them together.
Alex?
Yeah, it's kind of embarrassing because I don't have my reference material here, but aside from obviously, the Black Panther himself, I was first taken by, and I cannot remember her name, so one of you please save me. His love interest,
Nakia.
Nakia. I was fascinated by her from the get-go because the first introduction to her is she's undercover. And, when the whole, it's nice to see the Black Panther in action and everything, but she's undercover because she knew what was going on. And it was easily set up that she was out in the world trying to deal with some of the things that are going on. And obviously, in terms of slavery or in sort of oppression on a level, again, of black on black in this particular situation. And that fascinated me. And what the other end of that was, she was the first one to say, we should be doing something. And when I was talking to people after seeing the movie, for months, whenever I would ask, who brought that topic up, they would always say Killmonger. And I'm saying, don't you remember when Nakia said, oh yeah, that's right. So to me, it was like, no, she was the first one who went to T'Challa, there's a lot of stuff going on out here. We should be dealing with some of it. And that made her far more interesting to me. And it felt like, yes, she'd be a nice match for him because she can take care of herself. And at the same time, she's worldly aware and she has her own ethical stand. And even when he says, I want you to, come back and everything, she's, I got things I got to do. So I really enjoyed her. I think she was, I like Shuri. Believe me, I agree with you, Robyn. The relationship between them was great. But I also really find that other relationship was just very fascinating to me. I was really happy to see it.
Kyoko?
I am an Okoye girl all the way. So I loved her from her opening line. I had no real experience with Denai Guerrero before that because I'm a chicken and I can't watch The Walking Dead. But as soon as we were introduced to her, and like I said, I love the balance of Okoye because she seems like she's so cold and grumpy and mean, like she wouldn't care about things. But then you see that that's kind of just how she approaches the outside. When you're with her in her circles, she's very loving and teasing, and she has such a rich personality. And like I said, I loved her devotion to, I also love that they put her on a little bit of a journey for herself too, because she's like, in the first movie, I'm loyal to the throne. I'm sorry that it turned out this way, but that's my job. That's what I'm here to support. And then immediately is like, oh, no, it's not. When she found out what Killmonger was going to do. And it was like, oh, and I love that, again, she didn't dig her heels in further and try to justify, working for this. Again, had a good point, but absolutely vicious, no sympathy type of person, which is not going to be good for them or for the rest of the world. So I love that she was willing to be like, nope, I was wrong. I supported the wrong person. I need to right that wrong. And then she takes care of business, even to the degree that separated from her husband because he wanted to be a traitor. And it was like, sorry, dude, I don't serve you. I serve Wakanda and you're against Wakanda. So no more marriage. That was your fault. Sorry, dude. So I just thought that she was absolutely fascinating. And again, I love the balance that Denai was able to put into her character just in general of, like I said, just this undeniably badass general, but at the same time, still a person. And she still very much cared about everybody that was under her care. And again, that second movie was so brutal, but it was really, like I said, it was really well written with how it handled her as well.
Doc?
So I'm going to state up front that I can't remember names worth anything.
You and me.
We'll help you out.
But I definitely want to second, or I guess it's maybe third, the relationship between T'Challa and Shuri, and I love the fact that she doesn't just tease him; she teases everybody. She doesn't care. I love the fact that she's snarky, but I also wanted to point out two other characters. One being T'Challa's mother, because she is so incredibly earnest about supporting her children and trying to make sure that they do the right things. And then, of course, in Wakanda Forever, she's got this glorious arc where she's grieving the loss of her son, but she also has to support her country and get her daughter to step up to the responsibility. But the other character that I want to bring up was the I can't even the leader of the
M'Baku?
the gorilla tribe, yes, M'Baku. Just because it's like, he's comes in with this attitude. It's like, we've been up here all this time. You didn't come see us. We decided it's time for us to come see you. And he doesn't give an inch. And he keeps reminding them, it's like, it's a two-way street. You could have come to us. We could have come to you. You made us come to you. And now you're asking us for help. I love the character. I love the humor that he has in everything, because he's always he absolutely loves the little CIA guy, because it's like, you have no idea what's going on. I'm going to mess with you endlessly.
I remember when I went to the premiere, the biggest laugh was definitely when he said, "We are vegetarians." Yes. Everybody, the whole theater fell out laughing. That was, it's a movie full of good lines, but that was just so, it was wonderful.
One of the strongest things to me in looking at the first Black Panther movie, you can't have a good hero without having a good antagonist. I remember Killmonger from the comics was a very different characterization, right? How a lot of the time you saw him in some of the comics go through how he was dressed. Often he looked a lot more like Baku a lot of the time in the comics. When you saw that, and even if I remember right, from there might have even been one of the animated series where they had him and he looked very much a lot like Baku. But Killmonger in the first movie, looking at Michael B. Jordan coming out with very deliberate, very intelligent, and you could absolutely understand his motivations. There was no question. You could see that, and that idea of, you knew what he wanted, what he felt he deserved, what was his birthright. And that to me was one of the strongest points and part of what helped make that film. So Alex, what are your thoughts about Killmonger, how they presented him, how they built it up, and how the conflict was?
Oh, I thought that was brilliant. I think that made the movie, because had he been weaker or just a straight on bad guy villain, it would have just, there wouldn't have been a real story there. It would have been interesting, fun, all that kind of stuff. But the fact that you could understand where he was coming from, you could definitely, he was not lying. When he talked about the oppression, when he talked about what was done to him and his father, he did not lie about those things. And because of that, you go, well, yeah, he's telling the truth. And then you can see what kind of damage, what kind of trauma he went through as a young person. Unfortunately, as it will do, certain trials and tribulations and traumas that we face have a very strong push that sends us in a particular direction, there but for the grace of. So in his case, yeah, he took that particular path. He chose that path because of what he had been through. And it was unfortunate, because he could have been a stronger leader, a better person in certain ways. But I think had he been just a bad guy, this would not have been the powerful film that it was. And I think also because of his truth, even though he was coming at it from that destructive path, it forced T'Challa to ask questions and to deal with certain issues and to look at the sweep of the events differently, and to eventually as I believe it was Robyn who pointed out, confront his father and deal with, you were wrong because look, we should have brought him home. So I think that it just took what could have been an action-packed adventure, sci-fi thriller with costumes, and it made it a serious drama with fantastic visuals and a cultural experience that the screens had not seen before.
Kyoko?
I definitely think the same thing about him, just because up to that point, we had a handful of our Marvel antagonists. And I say antagonists because, again, there's a difference between an antagonist and a villain for sure in a story. And a lot of ours were, they were in service to the story. They didn't need to be really, really deep and layered and nuanced. Like Ronan is the one I always use when I talk about just a one-note villain. And that worked for the story. He just needed to be a zealot. That's it. There was nothing else we needed from him. We didn't need to dig into his life and find out his aspirations and things. But for him, I think it like Alex just mentioned, it added an extra dimension to the story to see that portrayal and realize that he's not entirely wrong. It's just an extremist view of an issue, which most of the time is what yields violence and other conflicts, is if you are just so intent on getting what you feel you want or what you need, and it can hurt others in a way that you may not even be intending. I think that really worked. And I also liked that the contrast of how cold and violent and just like intent on what he was doing. But in the end, when after he's about, technically they could have saved him and he chose death. But I think that it's important that T'Challa offered him mercy. Like that told you so much about both characters, that he wouldn't accept the mercy and that T'Challa offered it. After everything that Killmonger did to Wakanda, did to T'Challa personally, did to his family and his people, he still offered him compassion. And I really think that's something that they did well in Wakanda Forever too, because again, had that been me, roasted fish that day, nah. I would not have shown that man an ounce of mercy that Shuri did, but she did. And that's because those are characters who at their core are good people who understand that the person coming at them doesn't necessarily want to destroy them. It's because they feel that they need to. And so when you're able to reach that halfway point to still offer them compassion, it really, like I said, I think that a lot of what he did as an individual character was fantastic, but getting to see them react to him, I think added a lot to their characters as well.
Doc?
Can I just jump in? One quick thing. I think also, again, a lot has to be said for the way the MCU has dealt with a couple of their major antagonists, to take Kyoko's term. Because if you look at Thanos, in the comic books, it's a power mad play. That's really a lot about what he's about. But when they added in the film the motivation that he had, once again, it becomes like certain situations where you're saying, well, yeah, I see your point. I'm not thrilled with how you're going about it, but I see your point. It makes it harder to just say, disavow him. No, you're right, but you're wrong. So I think, again, the film industry has treated some of these storylines in a much more dramatic and mature way. And I think that's made for some powerful film time.
Doc, what are your thoughts?
One of the things I like about the Killmonger story is right up front in the beginning of the film, when T'Challa was going and rescuing his girlfriend who didn't need rescuing. Part of that they brought up about that was that the Wakandans don't leave anyone behind. That if somebody's in danger, they get them back. And then this whole story about Killmonger and his past comes out as like that the king deliberately left his nephew alone in the outside world against all this philosophy because he had to kill his brother. He and it was the fact that um he he did it so that he wouldn't have to deal with the difficulties at home. It's just such a horrible hypocrisy of having to of just leaving somebody out there on their own when so much of your philosophy is built around supporting everyone in your nation. And I love the fact that Killmonger, brought that forward and used that and made that his point in terms of bringing his challenge forward and doing the fight. The only thing that bothered me about it was after he thought he had won and he was in control, that his big thing went to, okay, we're going to go and sell all this technology out to the highest bidder, and we're going to seed groups and make a lot of money and cause a lot of chaos. And it's like that sounded a little off to me, and maybe I need to go and rewatch it, but it definitely felt like he was more interested. It seemed like he was more interested in the money than he was about helping people who were like him that had been abandoned and were suffering. But otherwise, I thought he was an excellent villain because, I'm sorry, an excellent antagonist because he wasn't that steeped in villainy. That was like the apparent greed motive was the only type of real villainy there. He felt betrayed by a lot of people, and he wanted to see them betrayed in turn.
Robyn?
I might need to rewatch it as well. I recently rewatched Wakanda Forever, but that wasn't exactly my recollection of what Killmonger did at that time when he got the crown. I thought he said that he was going to provide arms to other oppressed cultures and that they would essentially give fealty to Wakanda, and so that he was going to expand the empire of Wakanda by bringing in these other oppressed cultures and arming oppressed cultures. So I had a different understanding of that. Yeah. So other than that, I don't have anything else to specifically add about Killmonger. I don't know how much we're going to talk about the second movie.
Well, and I want to come into that because the next thing I want to actually dive into is to actually talk about, I want to talk about T'Challa first, right? Because when he picked up the mantle of Black Panther, we've had, through the comics, through the years, and now in the films, we've now had a couple of people pick up the mantle of the Black Panther. So Kyoko, looking at Chadwick Boseman, and I agree that he was about that perfect level of intensity and presence in terms of being picked for the role. But looking at T'Challa in the films, in the first film, what were your thoughts in terms of how he presented the Black Panther, how he picked up that mantle, and how they carried that story?
I think it had to kind of be him, and especially since up to that point I had only seen him in a few bit parts. Like there's a funny moment where I had been rewatching this miniseries called Justified, and oh my god, it's Chadwick. Just this tiny little bit part is some thug character in Harlan County, so that was funny. But I think that he knew that he needed to bring so many things to that role in order to let it have the impact that it did. So part of it is just excellent writing. But I think that what Chadwick was able to do was it's such a balance because he's so regal, he's so intelligent, he's so compassionate, but at the same time, he has limitations. So it was a really good thing that he did in the portrayal of not making T'Challa like a Christ-like figure, because I think that would have lessened some of the impact. if he had been like, oh no, T'Challa's perfect, there's nothing wrong with him, he's never made a mistake, he never loses a fight, like that, I think wouldn't have made it as good a performance, or the movie as good, if they had made him like he was supposed to be perfect. No, they show us that no, he's still a guy, he can mess up. When he loses, he almost lost the fight to M'Baku, and he does lose the fight to Killmonger, just because I think that he's a very fair person. He wants to, the way that he was fighting was a way that was honorable. And the way that Killmonger did was like, no, I'm here to crush you, humiliate you, hurt you as much as I can in as many ways as I can, humiliate. Just, it was so degrading. The way, and I like that they showed us the difference between that fight with M'Baku and that fight with Killmonger, and seeing how vicious he was. And so I think that Chadwick was able to just come up with this persona that was so almost calming in a way. Like, I really, like, there are a couple of MCU characters who I feel like I just want to go hang out with them, not even like talking. I just want to like sit next to you and hear you have a conversation. One of them is Vision. The other to me is T'Challa. I feel like he is someone where if you were in his presence, you would immediately feel safe. You would immediately feel appreciated. You would immediately feel that all of those things that he cares about, that are so, he wears his heart on his sleeve, which I love about him. And I think that's really what he was able to do in the end with that character, is just have this, he's so well-rounded. That's the word I think of with T'Challa in that performance, is really, really well-rounded.
Doc?
I have to agree. Chadwick brought an incredible gravitas to the role, but he didn't spare any of the other feelings. I mean, in Avengers Civil War, you see him go from being furious and homicidal to coming around to the end of it when he realized that he'd been chasing after the wrong man, and now that he finally found the right one, he was finally going to deliver justice and do it calmly and reasonably. And I think that's a lovely growth arc for him. That's a big part of why he's so beautifully well-rounded going into Black Panther.
Oh, thank you for bringing that up. I should have said that too, because and there are several lines I think that stand the test of time in the MCU that I think 10, 20 years ago, I mean, from now, we're going to remember. I think that's one of them, of like, vengeance has consumed you. It is consuming them. I will not let it consume me. I was like, oh, that was a beautiful line. I really love that.
Robyn?
I really liked the way T'Challa just felt like a real person, kind of echoing what both Doc and Kyoko have said. He brought the gravitas. So in those moments where, you expect him to be kind of regal and stately, he was in those moments with either with Queen Ramonda or with Shuri. He was, the loving son, the caring brother. In those moments where he had to question his father, when Killmonger presented him with information and with concepts and with ideas that he had never considered before, things that like literally shattered his worldview, instead of just kind of like shutting him down, he took the time to reflect, you know what I mean? And Chadwick Boseman as an actor brought all of that forward in a very real way that felt like an honest and genuine person, how they would react in the moment. So I thought that those various aspects of his character and the way that they were portrayed by Chadwick felt very true to life. And it felt very true to someone who I would want to respect in a king of my country if I were Wakandan. And that I would want in a brother or a cousin or whatever, if I was, part of the royal family, you know what I mean?
Alex?
The only thing I would add to this is, because again, yes, Chadwick's performance was stellar and humanizing. And I think that's the key factor. There are certain other actors who had been up for this role over the years, and I can see how they would have portrayed, or how they would have looked even, in terms of their body mass and so forth. But I think he humanized the character, and there was a couple of subtle moments in the Black Panther film where it made me think about the Avengers story, because both he and Killmonger had lost their father to violence, both of them. And I could see, whether it was intended or not, when Killmonger is speaking about that, you could see that there were things going on behind T'Challa's eyes. And that spoke to Chadwick's work as a performer, that his character, if we're seeing T'Challa, his character is hearing what's being said to him, not only because of the words being spoken, but because he is remembering, I too lost my father to violence. My father was killed. I can identify with what he's saying. And he could possibly even remember how he felt when his father was taken and he went after the person who he thought had killed him. So I really think, again, Chadwick brought so many levels to that, and you needed an actor of that quality to be able to do that.
You know, and one of the things that's, I think, unfortunately, because of the timing of his death, but I think that one of the things that we got from that was being able to see Shuri's transition into the Black Panther, right? You know, and Letitia Wright's characterization of Shuri, you know, in the first movie just was frenetic but brilliant, right? But you got to see her as the brilliant little sister, all of this, and then to have to see her step into that role as the Black Panther in the second film. So, Robyn, you know, when you look at that and her having to develop that arc so quickly and having to step into those shoes, how'd you feel about how they handled all of that and how Shuri handled being the Black Panther?
I thought that was so props to Ryan Coogler, because he had to basically, you know, steer a ship in a completely new direction with unexpectedly losing the star of, you know, a whole series of movies. And I felt that in terms of the writing in the story itself, with the like you mentioned, the arc of her character, the overarching plot line of what they went through dealing with the Talokans, and how they interwove that with the story and her response to that. Because having her see Killmonger in the ancestral plane played such, you know what I mean? She saw him because she was grieving and she was angry and she was just torn asunder, like ripped apart. And having her play that and connect those two together and connect all of those pieces together, just the way they created that story, I thought was absolutely brilliant. While it hit so many pieces, because it also paid homage to Chadwick and what he brought to the role and how he played such a pivotal role in creating this world and these large shoes that Shuri now has to step into. And I thought it was brilliant from a storytelling perspective, how the way that they went about telling it, as opposed to, you know, just picking up the mantle, but having her kind of grieve through that and struggle with her own grief, while at the same time dealing with this new threat to her people, while also trying to figure out, like, she's still a scientist and she's got to recreate the herb, and she's still a grieving family member, and now she's stepping into a leadership role in her country. So having all of those three play together, I thought was a brilliant story, and Letitia Wright as an actress really stepped up to bring all of those to the forefront.
And welcome, Sumiko.
Hi.
Do you want to give a quick introduction?
Yeah, my name is Sumiko Saulson. I am the Bram Stoker nominated author of The Rat King, and big fan of science fiction and horror. Yeah, I think that's probably it. Oh, and my pronouns are Z here and they them.
So, Alex, I'll hop back to you. So, looking at Shuri and Black Panther, right? So, looking at her arc in Black Panther and how they brought her in for that second film, how did that hit you for that one?
Well, I mean, on two levels. One, not to take anything away from it, but much of this arcing had occurred in the comics under the two, sort of the captain, let's say under the guidance of several other writers. Some of these arcs had been explored in the comic book, so there was a certain amount of material that they could go to the well for. But again, as it was stated, the fact that Chadwick passed and it threw everything off to such a degree, because we have to realize that it wasn't just that, an actor who played this role and passed, and that's terrible. It was the effect that Chadwick had on the population, on the fan base. I mean, if you think about it, there have been a number of actors who've played Batman, a number of actors who played Superman, a number of actors who played other characters that have gone on, iconic characters. But something about Chadwick's performance and the way the original film had been done, had this profound effect on not only Black people, but the fan base as well. So that was a major hurdle to have to deal with. So I think they did a brilliant job with that. I think that Shuri had to go through so much, because if you keep it all in context, it was her father that was killed too, initially. So that's one. Then her brother, then her mother, and then the kingdom is under attack. That's incredible amount of weight to put on a person, and literally could have crushed her. So what that said to me was, she is a formidable individual. But it also, I think, spoke to the nurturing that she had experienced since childhood, because she'd come up in a culture and in a house, in a home, where people had been there for her and had allowed her to blossom, to become more of the full person she was going to be. And I think that's what Ryan and this film made possible, was for us as an audience to see what can happen to an individual who, when everything had been thrown at them, could take it to a certain degree, and yes, go down to their knees for a period of time and feel all of the emotions that she went through, including the hate and anger and all of that, and still rise. And I think that was the most impressive aspect of me. Again, it's an action film too. There was a lot of that going on. But to understand that this character, this person, this young woman took all of that on and still managed to not only stand up and stand against the forces coming at her, but then also at that moment, again, where she could have, as Kyoko said, could have taken him out and felt, yep, done the job, it's all good. Turned around and offered compassion, because again, who raised her, what culture she came up with, what lessons she had learned, what she had seen, what she felt. All of that was a culminating experience for me. I think that made the story that much more powerful.
So, Sumiko, we're talking a bit about Wakanda Forever and Shuri stepping into the mantle of the Black Panther and stepping into that role. Have you got any thoughts on on how she stepped into that, how the story evolved from that?
Yeah, I do. So she actually took the suit that was Killmonger's suit. Pardon me, this is Marla. And I think that that had significance because what they were showing is, you know, in a lot of ways, the way that he got separated from his culture and raised in a colonialist environment where he was taught how to be a man in an oppressive culture. It kind of changed who he was. And they were showing how she took the suit and she took the mantle from him. But then when her mother came to her and then she got back in touch with how she was raised, then it showed how that warrior spirit and that kind of, you know, because there were things about him that were good that people could relate to, such as how he felt that Wakanda should help people who were in America and stuff like that. And we saw that her character earlier in the movie, how she protected the other young woman and stuff like that. It was all stuff that was the good side of what he claimed to be when he said that he wanted to reach out to other, you know, people in other countries like the United States and protect them in ways that he felt that Wakanda had abandoned them. So I think that they're showing that she has the positive part of what his legacy was, as well as the strength that she gained from who she actually was raised by, because she wasn't separated from her culture.
Hello, Kyoko.
I'm going to try to get through this without crying, but please don't be surprised if I do. I'm very emotional about Wakanda Forever. I think that the brilliance for it for me was that it allowed us to grieve in real time. Like all of us, like I literally lay in bed the entire day when we got the news that he passed, and I just cried. I cried for 24 hours. I'm still kind of crying a little bit right now. It was, and as Alex said, it's different when we have had actors that unfortunately passed away and had to be recast. But most of the ones that you think of, let's say like maybe Dumbledore, an example, he put something that was so specifically Chadwick into that character and into the role that there was no way it was going to be kosher for them to just recast and keep going. He meant everything to not only his cast members, but the crew and to, again, just people in general, white, black, whatever race. Everybody loved that movie. They had such a good time that it was, to me, the right decision to just have retire the character for now. We have multiverses, so that's why in the future they may be willing to kind of pick it back up again. But I think that what they did of letting us, like, they could have just skipped over it, like when unfortunately Heath Ledger passed for the Joker and they just didn't have the character in the next movie and just didn't mention it. They could have done that if they wanted to, but they knew that he was such a central figure and so important, not only to the MCU, but like he said, to the fan base, that it was the right call to just know we need to lay him to rest. We don't need to immediately pick up. And if we do want to later down the line when everybody's had enough time to grieve, then that's what we can do. But I think that the only thing I disagreed with was killing Ramonda. I was like, that's too much. It's too much trauma and too much grief, not just for Shuri, but as a actual audience member. I was a wreck. I was a wreck for a long time. Like it just seemed too cruel. And I think that was the point, is that no, we're going to push her to the point that she breaks. And she kind of did in a way. Like I said, when she went to the astral plane and saw Killmonger instead of her mother or her father or T'Challa for that matter. And so that piece, I get why they did it. I just felt it was too much. It really, and even to on a smaller financial side of things. If you look at the returns between the box office returns between both movies, the first one did more, and I really do think it's because the second one is so sad that I could only bring myself to watch it one more time. I could not do it. I was like, I am too emotional. I'm too attached to everyone here. So I've only seen it 2 times because I can't do it again. It was just it felt like having my feelings put in a blender in a good way. Like it wasn't bad writing, but it was just so emotional and such a drain that I think a lot of people were like me and they didn't go back because it was just like, oh, I have to be in a certain like mindset to be able to enjoy the story just because it's so very heavy, even though they do have those moments of beautiful action and wonderful levity and stuff like that. But I think that's kind of how I felt about it overall. But I was so proud of her stepping up because again, they did it in a way it was very human, and you were able to kind of heal with her as the story proceeded. And I think that was a beautiful thing for them to do, because I think it would have been very sad had they not actually put it into the plot. They just like had him pass away and just pick up and not really talk about it and just have an homage to him or something. But them having it be the central point of that storyline, I think really worked to their favor, really.
And
I'm glad
Angela
you brought
Bassett.
that up about I'm sorry, go ahead, Jim.
I was just going to say, and Angela Bassett not to get the Oscar.
That's a whole nother doggone panel.
Yeah,
don't get me started.
Different panel. Yeah.
Don't get me started. I could scream about that. And the thing is, the sad part about that one was I didn't pay attention to the Oscar because I don't care. But I didn't know that Jamie Lee Curtis got nominated, and I've seen EEAO, and I was like, Hot Dog Fingers is up against Queen Ramonda. Are you serious? Right? And again, wonderful movie. But again, those roles, not even close to the same thing. So it was kind of a big middle finger, if you ask me.
And Jamie Lee Curtis hardly had any screen time compared to Angela Bassett, too.
Yes,
like, she was hardly even in that movie.
Seriously,
she had three powerful scenes in that movie. I mean, powerful scenes.
Yes. So yeah, Bassett got robbed. I mean, even if we're not talking about Bassett, the girl who played the antagonist in Everything Everywhere All at Once, you didn't give it to her either. She was phenomenal. She was in the entire film. So again, it's just, I don't like to be like that, but I was like, it really felt like it was a bunch of old white people in a room going, there's too many people of color getting awards. I need to go stick a white lady in here. Like that to me is how it felt. It just felt like it was like, we don't want too many people of color winning Academy Awards. So let's just give it to Jamie Lee Curtis, even though, again, wonderful actress who does deserve an Oscar. I just think it was the wrong time. It was like, give her one. She'll do something soon. I'm sure that'll be just as good. It was not right to me. But
I have to agree. And that's one of the problems with the Academy.
Seriously.
There's many problems with the Academy. All right, Robyn, I am sorry I cut you off.
That's all right. I was just going to say to Kyoko's point, I also thought it was too much when they killed Queen Ramonda in that. But I also wonder if they did it because Ramonda had been kind of in the beginning of that film, like holding Shuri very tightly, completely understandably, because like she said to Okoye, at that time when Okoye first lost Shuri, she said, I lost my husband, I lost my son, and now you've lost my daughter. And so I wonder if Queen Ramonda I wonder if they killed her because from a storytelling perspective, she possibly would not have been okay with Shuri taking up the mantle of Black Panther, because she didn't even want her to go to just travel. So to have her take on, the role of the protector of the nation, I wonder if that's part of why they did it. Not that I wanted it to happen, but
yeah, and that was the difference between I wasn't angry about it. I was like, no, I understood why it happened, but I was just like, God, that was too much to put on that poor.
That was painful.
It was definitely painful. Yeah.
I agree it was painful, and I also think that going back to the Academy Award thing just for a split second, when you look at the scenes that she had, that Angela Bassett had, and you look at where the Queen was throughout that film, it just made for such a powerful moment. When she died, it was like I was sitting there going, I was truly upset, but I wasn't mad that they did it. Oh, like why? What was the director thinking? I was mad that she died, that she was taken. That upset me. The only other thing I just wanted to quickly say is another thing that I would just I need to acknowledge is that, to my knowledge, and it may be limited, one of the things about Wakanda Forever that stands out is, if you think about it, it is the only major feature-length film where the cultures, the two cultures, the massive upfront cultures that are being explored were not white. I can't think of a single other film anywhere that exists. And that was so powerful. I sat there still in the story, but every now and then my head went, whoa. You know, I'm sitting in a milestone moment here. And I've done projects where we teach kids how to create, you know, their own superheroes, but I do it based on the culture that the student is coming from. I said, well, think about where you're from. Think about what a character with abilities might be like coming from your culture. And then to be able to sit there in that movie theater and realize that I've seen Namor since the 40s, he's always white. And even Aquaman, talking about DC, white, you know, even though they're fish people, you know, and to suddenly have this whole, a totally different culture, it was fantastic. And so that's one of the other major accolades that I would offer this particular film.
I was going to say,
I'll
too.
shut up now.
Oh, no.
I was just going to say, to your point, I think another brilliant thing about both films is that they took the time to give you a backstory to your antagonist and your protagonist, and they made side characters that you wanted to learn more about and connected with. So I feel like, you know, when you go and you watch other superhero movies beyond that, and kind of like, I think Kyoko, you had mentioned it before about, you know, making characters who were white, turning them into people of color earlier in the hour. Part of what Wakanda Forever does brilliantly, to where, like you said, Alex, so where it doesn't feel weird making him Mayan, is because they give us such a well-grounded story that makes a lot of sense. It just makes logical sense for him to have this culture and to be this person, and it fits really well with the story, and it allows you to connect not just to the fact that he is of Mexican culture, but also connect to his story and to his past and to his motivations and his culture and his people. They just did such a really good job with fleshing out, not just making him a person of color for the sake of making him a person of color, but also actually giving him a story that you can connect with.
One thing I wanted to bring up very briefly is the instant that I knew we had the right storytellers is when Nakia goes to that village to speak to the woman that she thinks has the information she needs, but she says it in her language. One thing I hate is in any major film when an American or a character goes to another country but starts talking their native language to someone in their home country. It drives me up the wall, especially because it's a very American thing. We will go to somebody else's country, in the country that they know the native language is not English, and just start talking it. It drives me crazy. But the fact that they did that, it was like, that's nuance. That shows that you had people there who cared about what they were making, that she immediately starts speaking the right language to that woman when she goes up to her. I loved that. I thought that was so good.
And the fact that the Talukans speak Mayan, not Spanish.
Well, let me throw this out there because we can't wrap this up without asking this question. We've kind of started going down this path. And Alex, I'm gonna start with you on this one.
I didn't do it.
Yeah, well, you started it, so I'm gonna let you sort of finish it. What do you think the legacy is going to be of Black Panther as we see its impact not only in the MCU, but I mean, if we look at the fact that the expectation was that it was going to be a box office failure, and it was a massive success. And I think it was a massive success because it was a great story, well acted, but I think it proved there's markets out there and that there's good storytelling for people of color. But to me, it was not a good storytelling for people of color. It was good storytelling, and it showed us culture, and it showed us world building, and it was an impactful story. And to me, is one of the top films out of the MCU, but it's also just a top film for me because, again, it was done so well. But what do you think? Just looking at the immediate future, the legacy is going to be of Black Panther.
You don't ask easy questions.
Hey, that's why they pay me the big bucks. I get to ask them.
Yeah, that's right. It's a very large dollar bill behind you. Fortunately or unfortunately, the future holds for great quality stories about people of different cultures, lifestyles, predilections, and so forth, depending on the sway of society at the time. And I don't mean that in a negative way. I mean that we're always going to have to fight for justice. We're always going to have to fight for equal rights and representation. And that's just the nature of the beast. If the past couple of years haven't made that clear, then I think we need a wake-up call, because I think that what they did with the Black Panther, the original film, and then following up with Wakanda, says that what's been a reality since the dawn of time. It's doable. It's possible. There is a market if it's done right. Absolutely. That's a known. It's been a known that's been ignored. That's really all it's been. It's a known that's been ignored. And at this one wonderful moment in space and time, the right people had the opportunity to do the job well, the job that could have always been done by the right people, doing their work, doing their homework. Brilliantly done. Great, fantastic. Given that opportunity or making that opportunity going forward, you'll see a lot more good material out there. Absolutely. But if you want to ask, is it a given now? Hell no. Because I'll just it's not even the same quality, but I'm going to use it as the same example of what I'm talking about. The Marvels, 3 women in the lead. Before the movie even came out, it was being bashed because 3 women in the lead. What's the problem? 3 women in the lead. 3 powerful women. What's the problem? Oh, well, it's not going to be this, not going to be that. Oh, God, give me a break. So, to my way of thinking, we're always going to have work to do to keep the door open, to build a pass key so that if they close the door, we can open it ourselves. Whatever is necessary, we're going to have to do it so that this continues and builds on it to maybe someday in the far distant future when we don't even have to have this discussion. But I think that's a far distant future.
Sumiko? So what do you think the legacy of Black Panther is going to be?
Yeah, so a few things I want to say. I think people have some misconceptions about who goes to movies in theaters, and I think that's part of the problem. So people feel like they made a big risk by doing Black Panther, but actually it is something that was long overdue. So currently something like 54% of American moviegoers are white, and like 61% of the population is white. So if you look at it by percentage of population, Latino folks have been the fastest growing demographic. So you've now got 23% of the tickets sold are sold to Latino folks, who are only 18% of the population. For Black folks, the percentage of people who go to the movies is about the same as the population. So rather than it actually being that they're taking a big risk by marketing stuff to people of color, what's happening is it's getting closer to where half of the actual tickets sold are to people of color, and less white folks are going to the movie. This has to do with a lot of different things like streaming services, people watching stuff at home on their computer or on a TV. So, young white people like college students and stuff are just a lot more likely to sit at home and stream something on their TV. and not go to the theater. And this was even before we had the pandemic. Okay. So if you go to see movies in the theaters a lot, you might have a very different impression. So when they came out with Black Panther, they knew this. Black Panther was a big success. And when that happened, they started looking at the other demographics. And that year in particular, after that, when they came out with Rich Crazy Asians, it's because more Asian folks were going to the movies. Okay. They're doing these things because they make money. They're not doing them to be good with people of color. They're doing it because people of color are the ones that are buying the tickets, and that's who's seeing these images on the screen. And that's why you see more POC superheroes, because the people going to see these superhero movies in the box office are families of people of color. And honestly, people who go to the movies with big old groups of kids and go out there with their teenagers and stuff like that, Black folks, Latino folks, okay, and some years Asian folks and white folks are just not as much like the center of that. Still a lot of white people going to movies, but just they can't just make movies for white people anymore because they have to worry about their bottom line. So what I think is you're going to continue to see more of these movies because of who goes to see the movies. Are they all going to be as serious and as message driven as Black Panther? Probably not. But you still got stuff like Miles Morales. And all of this is happening because of economics. That is my view.
So Kyoko, what do you think the legacy is going to be for Black Panther?
I agree. A lot of it has to do with the dollars. They didn't magically wake up and have a conscience about making stuff for people of color. It's because they found out, oh, wait, no, we have an entire untapped market we've been ignoring because we're so used to our old demographic of 18 to 34-year-old white people. I think there's this great scene in a series I love called Feud, Betty and Joan, which is about Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. Where there's a character who says to another character who really wanted to get into filmmaking, but she's a woman, and this is 1962. So obviously it'd be next to impossible for her to ever get to direct anything. But what Mamacita points out to her is that the demographic did change. And as far back as the 60s, she was talking about when the country was first settled and the male sex ratio, and that women surpass men in terms of being in the country, that the studios would then be obligated to start hiring women directors and having more stories that were female centric. And I think that's really what's going to happen moving forward with the legacy of both Black Panther and Wakanda Forever, is that if you sit down and you actually put the effort in, which is what they never want to do, because movie studios want safe. I want automatic locked in money. I know that I don't have to risk anything and I'm going to get my returns, which is why they were never going to stop the remakes and we're stuck with it forever. But I think that's what's going to happen is a lot of people who are sitting on the bench thinking, oh man, there's no way me as a person of color am ever going to get a chance to tell a story I want to tell. And they're getting to see that that's not true. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll get a major release like that, because that was definitely lightning in a bottle. But those people are now seeing, oh, wait a minute, I do have some options to get my stuff out there, whether I self-publish, I go indie, or I find all the different types of formats in which I can tell a story, whether that's video games, books, movies, anything. They see that success and know, oh, wait a minute, maybe I don't have to hold this little dream inside of me and think that it's impossible. There are opportunities for me to go out here and see if I can run after that thing that I want. And I think that's definitely what's going to happen with the success of both films, is not only just people of color, but women. As you said before, it was really great that the central focus was only on the female characters in that film. Now, we still got our fun with M'Baku and with the Namor as well. But I think that's exactly what it's going to do. It's going to inspire people who were a little bit reticent or afraid of any or putting themselves out there to go ahead and do that, because they can now see that there is a market for it. There are people who are excited to read stories about women and women of color and people of color in these genres. I think that's definitely what's going to happen. But as he said, it's a while off now. But yeah, I think that's where we are.
Doc?
I'm just gonna agree with everything that's been said before, but for me, the biggest thing that Black Panther the movie did is it proved that every time Hollywood has gone and said, "Oh, you can't make money unless you market to white people," they were wrong. Every single time it has been wrong, and I hope that means that in the future that we get more Black Panther and we get more Shang-Chi, and we get more Miss Marvel, and we get more Marvels, because every time Marvel has done a diversity show and they have highlighted another culture, there's all this richness that comes into it, because white people is not a culture. There's hi cat.
He saw the other cat and got jealous.
Dueling cats here.
Yep. Mandatory cat content. We have plenty of it. Yeah, there's no culture that defines whiteness. It's just lack of melanin. And that's a disservice to people from Europe, and it's a disservice to everyone from the whole rest of the world, with many wonderful sparkling cultures that we all should look at and appreciate. And I want to see more.
You're here.
And I want to hear it in their own voices.
Robyn?
So I think the legacy of Black Panther is kind of, for me, that it was a triple threat. Aside from the validity of everything that everyone has already said, it was amazing storytelling. It had great character development. It had a nuanced plot. The aesthetics were amazing. The amount of detail that went into creating the world of Wakanda itself, all the way down from the city to people's homes, to the way that they dressed, to the music. There was like a documentary on Disney Plus about how much time they spent making sure that the music also kind of gave a nod to the culture. And they did that very thoroughly with both the first Black Panther film and with Wakanda Forever, with the when we were introduced to the Talokans, and then also the cultural relevance, because a lot of times, sometimes you just want to have a good time, you just want to have fun. It definitely did that, but it also had a lot of cultural relevance for every person who is an American person. Like, we can all understand that story and know where it comes from and know what it means. And it has like real world impact to how we live our lives day to day. So I think it was just a perfect storm of a lot of things that are important to storytelling, all in one package. So I think the legacy of Black Panther is that, aside from being very important for people of color and Black people specifically to have that representation, I think it just set a very high bar for storytelling across the board.
You're here.
I think that's a place we'll wrap it up, because we've gone for a while and we could keep going. We haven't even made a good dent in some of the stuff I wanted to get to, but that just means we'll have to do another round. But before we do that, let's make sure everybody knows where to find you guys. Website, social media, and of course, what books they need to go pick up. So, Kyoko, you're up first.
Okay. So, of course, we've got Black Panther Tales of Wakanda. That is an anthology that is available in audiobook, paperback, hardcover, and I'm in that. I have a short story about Okoye called Ukubamba. I have, like, as I mentioned before, sorry, when we started, I am in the Sam Wilson, The Shield of Captain America anthology, which will be out November of next year. So please go and pre-order that. It's available, I think, in hardcover. I don't think paperback's out yet, but I think it's that. I also have an upcoming book with Falstaff Books, but that's not been announced yet. So just be on the lookout. All my stuff is at shewhowritesmonsters.com.
Doc?
If you're interested in finding out about me and my books, just go to your favorite search engine and search for Doc Coleman Steampunk. And that will lead you to my Amazon author page where you can see all of my stuff that's been published, and you can follow it to see this other stuff as it comes out. You can also visit my website at doccoleman.com.
Robyn?
Our podcast is online at diversityissues.libsyn.com, Libsyn, or you can find us anywhere you get your podcasts. We're on Apple Podcasts and Google Play.
Alex?
Oh, geez. My website is Simmons Here and Now, all spelled out, .com. I'm on Instagram at Alex Simmons Says, as well as I'm on Facebook. I am also in the Black Panther Tales of Wakanda with Kyoko, and hopefully also in the Sam Wilson, Shield of Sam Wilson book, which, as she said, isn't out yet. But hey, keep an eye out for it because it's good. Also in Amazon, you can find my Blackjack adventure books on Amazon. And my podcast is Tell the Damn Story, which is on Spotify and Apple Podcasts and a couple other things with co-host Chris Ryan.
Sumiko?
Yeah, I'm at SumikoSaulson.com, and I'm in Black and Roots, which is vampire. No, it's not. Actually, that was Slay. It's zombies from the African diaspora. But Slay also, both of those are on Mocha Memoirs Press. Recommend you check it out.
I didn't know you were in Black and Roots. Congrats. That's awesome.
Thank you. Yeah. Nicole Gibbons Kurtz is so really talented.
She's wonderful. I love seeing her every single time I bump into her. She is so phenomenal, and she's so good at finding talent. So again, congratulations. That's really awesome.
Thank you.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host tonight, Jim Nettles, and you can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentialsworkshops.com, speculative-fiction-academy.com, and of creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see you guys again soon.